Hello, this is Dr. Eric Bricker, and thank you for watching AHealthcareZ. Today's topic is Medicare payment uncertainty and how it relates to employers. Now, what I have here on this point number one is how hospital revenue is broken down in terms of source. So it's 40% Medicare, 40% commercial insurance, 10% Medicaid, and 10% self-pay, or what's oftentimes referred to as no pay. Right? So that's the typical breakdown for how a hospital gets paid. And that's based on my consulting experience that I did before going to medical school, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let's specifically turn to a video that's on YouTube from the HFMA. And this is an important organization for everyone that is in healthcare to know about. And it stands for the Hospital Financial Management Association. And it is the trade association for hospital CFOs and for hospital billing directors. Now, on this webinar sponsored by the HFMA, they have two attorneys from Polsinelli. And Polsinelli is a huge law firm. It's based out of Kansas City, and it has a huge healthcare practice. So many hospitals across the country hire Polsinelli as for their legal expertise. So again, in healthcare, Polsinelli is a very important name for all of us to be familiar with. And this webinar, again, very few views. It is from April of this year, so it's pretty recent stuff. Not a lot of people have watched it. I'll leave a link to it in the show notes. I highly encourage you. Of course, it's got a fair amount of legalese. It's a little tough to get through, but it's highly instructive. And one of the things it talked about was contesting recruitment during appeal. And so this is specifically for Medicare. This is when a hospital has been told by Medicare, hey look, we, Medicare, overpaid you, so we're going to recoup that money. Either by literally asking you to write a check back, or we're just going to hold off on paying you like other bills that you've billed for us. And so the hospital does have an appeals process that they can go through to say, hey look, we as the hospital disagree with your idea that you have overpaid us. We think you've paid us appropriately. So they can appeal that. Guess how many steps that appeal has? It has 5 steps. Guess how long the backlog is for that appeal? It is 3 years. Not 3 months, not a year, it is 3 years. So in other words, Medicare could just say, hey, we want our money back, and they can take it back, and if the hospital wants to appeal it, they might not be able to take back Medicare taking it back for 3 years. Now, this webinar talks about how just recently there was a judge in Texas that said, well, this is a little crazy here, and put the kibosh on it for one particular facility for $7 million. But in general, that's how it works. Okay, if you're a company where 40% of your revenue comes from a customer who can sort of willy-nilly decide not to pay you, then that's a tough business to be in. Okay, next up. They specifically talk about a situation with auditing, where in one particular instance, Medicare audited 120 claims for something that's referred to as hyperbaric oxygen. It's used for wound therapy or wound treatment for wounds that are very tough to heal. And out of those 120 claims, they found a very high error rate. It was something like an 84% error rate. They then extrapolated, based upon those 120 claims they looked at, to 44,000 claims. Okay, so 120 versus 44,000. I'll just say that is a relatively small sample size. Oh, by the way, they applied that, again, sort of across all hospitals. They didn't say, hey, in particular, certain hospitals are doing a better job than other hospitals. They just said, hey, kind of carte blanche, this is what's happening across all these hospitals. Those 44,000 claims were for $59 million. Medicare then said, we need $42 million of that back. Again, not specifically by hospital. Maybe some hospitals were horrible offenders, and some hospitals were not offenders at all. But they said, we don't care. We want $42 million across the board. But they didn't stop there. They said, look, you as the hospitals, you need to go back and you need to review all of your hyperbaric oxygen claims. And you got to do it within 60 days. You got to figure out if they're appropriate or not. And if after those 60 days you do not correct any inappropriate bills, then if we go back after those 60 days and find them to be inappropriate, then we will accuse you of fraud. Whoa! Okay, so here we have two situations where they have used a fairly small sample size across the board with all hospitals, not treating hospitals differently, and they have an appeals process that has a backlog of 3 years. So again, if you're running a hospital and 40% of your revenue is coming from Medicare, then you better believe you're going to hedge your bets with your other sources of revenue. This 40%, which is the employers. And so that gets me to point number 5, which is, look, Medicare passes the buck to hospitals. Hospitals pass the buck to insurance carriers. Insurance carriers then pass the buck to employers, and employers then pass the buck to the employees in the form of high deductible plans, etc., or increased premiums coming out of their paycheck, or just increased premiums for the plans overall. Okay, so my point for today is that if you're an employee and you've got to complain about the employer, or you've got to complain about the insurance carrier, and they have complaints about the hospital, just know that up here is the root of a lot of our challenges in Medicare. Even if you're just an employer plan and you're an employee, you're under 65, you're not even on Medicare. Medicare still profoundly impacts you. And that's my point for today. Thank you for watching AHealthcareZ.